Hey guys, welcome back to 1776 or Bust. So on the table, two great handguns. There's absolutely no denying that CZ makes some world-class handguns, whether it's the Shadow, P01, P10, P07, whatever. They're all just great, fantastic handguns, at least in my opinion. With that being said, the reason why I have both of these handguns on the table is because on our live chats that myself, KS Gun Guy, and Big Johnson have every Wednesday night, we always kind of talk about CZs. We are all fans of CZ. We have a lot of fanboyism on the channel in regards to CZ. And obviously a lot of the people who come to see our chats also are huge fans of CZs. With that being said, a question that is constantly being asked about it is if we had to choose between a P10 and a P07, which would be the handgun we would choose? Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, you choose this over this or this over that. There's no way I can make that decision for you. You know, everybody's going to have their own personal preference as to what they actually like. They're going to like, you know, a hammer fired versus a striker fired. They may like the ergos a little bit better. They may like the trigger shape a little bit better. Ultimately, it's going to be your choice. With that being said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go over both of them and show you kind of what I like about both, what I may not like about both, and then ultimately tell you which one I prefer. With that being said, this one here, the P07, is a fantastic firearm. Now, the P07 is really the second CZ that I ever owned, but I actually owned the P07 Duty before this one came out. Now, the P07 Duty was actually a fantastic firearm for what it was worth at that point. It was fairly cheap. It wasn't the best overall firearm. It actually had some little issues with it that, you know, some people may not have been really turned on by, especially, you know, considering there was a really large market for great quality handguns when that was first released as well. With that being said, the original Duty did not have some of the features that you see here on the new P07s. Again, the Duty has been dropped from the name here, although you still see it advertised as the P07 Duty when it's now just the P07. Now, in regards to this handgun, one of the things that the P07 Duty was problematic with was that the polymer they used was, you know, for short of a better term, crappy. You used to get separation here from the polymer from the internal frame. And that was a problem. You know, you could actually push it in and you could actually see the separation right in here, which was never a good thing to see. Now, of course, CZ came out and said it wasn't going to compromise the handgun in any way. However, that never really made you feel good about it. That being said, also the finish of the handgun that they used to have on these was terrible. I think when I first got out of the box, it was black, and then within 30 seconds, it turned into this really dull, gray looking color, almost like a Parkerized look to it, which, you know, again, you know, it's a handgun. I understand it's a tool, but you also want to have nice looking tools. At that point, the gun wasn't just that nice looking. Other than that, most of the features have stayed intact. You know, you have the same decocker slash safety now. You also have the same takedown slash slide lock, slide release. They changed the hammer. They also obviously changed the cuts of the slide. Now, instead of being a little, you know, it used to be a little bit more squared and a little sharper on the edges, but you can see that they did a really nice job beveling the slide. Oh, look. And they actually beveled the frame too. What a surprise. With that being said, you know, it turned out to be a fantastic second generation of a handgun. And CZ has had a winner with this for a long time. People continue to buy them up and they are readily available on the market. With that being said, what are some of the drawbacks of the handgun? Well, you know, a lot of people talk about the Omega trigger. Now, the Omega trigger, the real key difference between this Omega trigger and some of the old curved shaped triggers is obviously going to be the shape. With that being said, obviously the internals are a little bit changed. They're actually less internal components to an Omega trigger than the original triggers. Also, you can interchange all the internal components to any P07 anywhere because they will operate, which is kind of nice. And of course, you have the additional feature of swapping this decocker out to a safety as well. So those were some kind of great features. The sights that came on them were pretty good, regular glow-in-the-dark sights. They were that luminescent sight, but you know, ultimately I wound up changing them for XS big dots. And I absolutely love the setup. It's a great setup, great form, great features. Ergonomically, it is not a traditional CZ75 grip, because you don't have that curvature in the back, although you can see here there is a slight curvature. You also do have the extended beaver tail, which does make it sit very, very nice. And one of the things that I always said about the P07 that I actually like better on this than, let's say, the P01 or the PCR is that the beaver tail is just, the way it sits in your hand, it just feels more comfortable. It is a little bit dragged out further and a little higher up on the grip, whereas your P01 sits a little bit tighter, so you don't necessarily get as high as you'd like underneath the slide. With that being said, both of those guns are still great. The P10, again, completely different beast. It's a striker fired handgun. It's got a very light take up, very smooth trigger. Obviously, this is an aftermarket trigger from HB Industries, but the original box that came out of the box trigger is a fantastic trigger also. Very light take up, very light trigger, and it's a very, very nice tactile, smooth trigger. Again, you can see the finish is very, very similar, if not identical, to the finish they're using on the P07 and the P09. So that is a huge plus because this finish, man, is fantastic. One of the best finishes on the market, in my opinion. The P10, again, it's not a very, control-laden handgun. You've got your takedown notches. You've got your slide lock, slide release, which is more or less a slide lock because it's very difficult to release the slide. And of course, you have your mag release here. Now, the gun does sport all ambi features, which is a huge plus on the market for a lot of people. The P07, oh, look, it's also ambi with the exception of the mag release. So that's kind of a nice feature. Oh, and also the slide release. So that's kind of a nice feature as well. In regards to the grip, ergonomically, fantastic grip. Now, it may look like it's a little more curved, let's say, than the P10, but I would tell you that it's actually not. I think where the illusion comes in is the way they've undercut underneath the slide. Instead of having an external beaver tail, like let's say this right here, they've actually made a nice deep undercut underneath the slide into the polymer. So basically this, the grip here, or the, whatever you want to call it, the back of the grip, sits in your hand just like a beaver tail would. And because you can get so deep into there, the gun is extremely controllable. Again, a lot of people will say that the one of the advantages that the P07 has over the P10 is the simple fact that the slide rides inside the frame. Why? Because you have the internal rails. The P10 did not go that route. Instead, the P10 has the external rails like a traditional firearm. With that being said, there was some complaints from people saying, why did CZ do that? I, for one, would have liked to have seen them ride in there as well. But looking at it now, I would say it's not necessary. And the reason being is because people will say that this allows you to get really, really high into the gun, which low bore access, which makes it a better shooter. But I would tell you, you're actually going to get a lot deeper into this gun and you're getting a much, much lower bore access because you can see where that frame is really a part of your hand. Whereas with this one, that beaver tail soaks up a lot of that. Now, again, if you remove the beaver tail and you do a deeper undercut here, it would work in the same concept as the P10. With that being said, comfortability is going to have to be your call also. Again, you have a double single action here, so your first shot is going to be a heavy pull. This one is ranging anywhere from 9 and change to 10 as their double action. Out of the box, this was ringing in around 4.5 pounds, 5 pounds. It has now been cut down to about 4 pounds. But again, this has over 1,000 rounds through it. So that's pretty nice. Single action on the P07 is about 3 pounds and change. So again, fantastic single action. And the advantage that you'll have is if you decide to change this into a safety only, while you'll be able to carry it cocked and locked, you're going to have a really, really smooth single action only trigger. With that being said, if you're not comfortable carrying it that way, again, you can also have your striker fired, which has very little take up and then a very beautiful, beautiful smooth trigger pull. Overall, both guns are fantastic. Features-wise, they have very similar features. You have the replaceable back straps for both. It doesn't really do much. For me, not really. Both have mediums on them. In regards to the slides, slide condition and slide surface coating is fantastic. Again, you can see there's a lot of similarities. Even if you look at both guns from the top, they're basically twins with each other. In regards to the overall shootability to both, it, again, is going to depend on you. Some people go out there and they just train and train and train on double single action all the time, and they are extremely excellent shooters with that standard. With the striker fired, again, people really favor the striker fired because it is an easy trigger system to learn. It's the same trigger pull every time. With that being said, it's going to be about what you prefer. Do you like the traditional double single action? Do you like the cocked and locked single action only? Or do you like the striker fired? That's going to be your choice. Now, if I had to choose between both of these handguns and which one I prefer and why, it's a really tough choice. You know, the P07 it just feels great in the hand. It's hard to explain. And if you've never owned one, it's difficult for you to really understand just how comfortable this handgun is. I would say, to me, this was kind of the early competition to the Glock, even though it was a double single as opposed to a striker fire. However, with that being said, the P10, in my opinion, just hits a home run with the ergonomics. Again, I am just a big fan of these large undercuts underneath the slide, because what that does is it allows you to get just an excellent grip on the handgun, which makes it a joy to shoot. Overall, for me, which do I prefer? I actually prefer the P10. I have a very long history with the P07. I have never had any issues with it. Even though this one was slightly plagued with some bugs, those bugs have been fixed, and I have had no other issues with that. I think right now, for me, if there was one major drawback for both of these handguns, it would definitely be the aftermarket. There is not much going on with that. Yes, you can get a trigger for this, which makes it a nice flat trigger. This one, you can get some more options for sights as opposed to this, although there are some now available to you. I would tell you that would be my biggest bone of contention, is the aftermarket just is not that good. Another bone of contention is basically the mags, okay? This is right here is a P10 magazine. This is a P07 magazine. Now, you'll notice that they are basically identical. And they are. They look identical. They feel identical. There's no issues, except for the way it was cut here on the P10 mag and not here on the P07. Earlier P07s that were released, not the duties, but the second gens, do not have that cut in there, which makes it unusable in a P10, which is kind of stupid in my opinion. With that being said, I can use the P07 mag in my P10. I'm sorry, vice versa. I'm sorry, my bad. So the P10, you can see it won't lock into place because there's no cutout here. So there's no way to lock it in place. Obviously, for this one, because you don't have the ambi mag release, there's your P07, but here's your P10 mag. Locks in place, no issues. So that's the only unfortunate downside if you went out and got yourself an earlier generation of the P07 Gen 2. The newer P07s that have come out, they've actually made the mags where now they have that that little cutout there. So now you can actually swap back and forth. So from that standpoint, that's my only other negative about it. Otherwise, guys, I'd love to hear what you have to say. Tell me which one you think is better and why. Tell me if you've had experience with both and which one you would choose. And if you haven't, tell me why you went with the one you did. So I hope you guys have a great night. Hopefully you stay safe out there. And as always, freedom is never free.